Chapter 173. Shizun. Someone wants to chase us away. Chuaning felt like he was caught holding a hot potato. He had no idea what to do. As more and more eyes turned in his direction, his ears flushed red with embarrassment. At that moment, a pair of hands reached out to take the child from his arms. Chuaning let out a breath of relief and turned. Moran? Moran shifted the child to the crook of one arm. With his free hand, he ruffled Chuaning's hair. His expression was solemn, his features weighed down faintly with melancholy after tragedies in Linyi. Still, he made an effort to lift the corners of his lips in front of Chuaning, not wishing to show him an unhappy expression. His half-smile wasn't so gallant as usual, but it radiated an indescribable warmth. All settled with the islanders? All settled. The fire in Linyi probably won't burn itself out for a few days. We should stay on Flying Flower Isle for now. But there aren't many houses on the island, and we've brought so many people. I've asked the village elder. He said there will be room if we double up. Moran had always been good at handling such things. He had a knack for getting on well with others, and as for his looks, Chuaning remembered how the girls in Yuliang village had eyed Moran when they'd helped with the rice harvest. Without a doubt, Moran was vastly more likable than he. Chuaning stood in silent thought for a while, unable to identify what he was feeling. He nodded. You've worked hard. No need for that with me. Moran took one look at the candy still in Chuaning's hand and understood what had happened. With a laugh, he turned to comfort the oblivious child in his arms. Hey you, why are you crying? I want Mommy. I want Daddy. The child was so young, he still walked unsteadily, yet he'd already lost both his parents forever to the sea of flames. Moran's heart ached as he looked at the boy. He pressed his forehead to the child's and consoled him softly. Your mom and dad have some things to take care of. It'll be a few days before they can come stay with you. Be a good boy now, so they'll be happy when they see you. The child gradually calmed as Moran held and soothed him. Although he still sniffled from time to time, he'd stopped screaming and wailing. Still holding the candy, Chuaning stood to the side and watched Moran lower his head toward the tearful child. His profile was beautiful, its contours strong and crisp. Were he a watercolor painting, his brushstrokes would be vigorous and masterful, an extraordinary composition that effortlessly produced a face without equal. His features were cleanly defined, but his lashes and the eyes that peered through them were soft, like delicate leaves unfurling in spring. Chuaning's mind began to wander. When Moran leaned over to take the candy at his fingertips with his mouth, Chuaning jerked back in surprise, his eyes widening. What are you doing? The sticky rice candy was small. Moran's lips had naturally brushed against Chuaning's fingers when he bit into the candy. In fact, the warm, wet tip of his tongue had even flicked the pads of Chuaning's fingertips by accident. Chuaning's whole body went numb. This tiny, fleeting intimacy sent an itch scuttling down his spine, like a tender sprout breaking from its seed and pushing the impassive soil out of the way, pressing against the suffocating earth until it became soft and malleable. Moran grinned at him with the candy between his lips and then turned to wink at the child. He tossed the candy up to catch it in his mouth, his throat bobbing as he did. See? It's not some scary medicine, he said to the boy. It's only sweets. Chuaning was speechless. Lost in thought, he hadn't been paying attention to Moran's murmured conversation with the boy. Only now did he look back toward the child, who was staring at Moran with timid, earnest eyes. It's really candy? He finally said in a tiny, astonished voice. Yep. Moran smiled. This cultivator Gugge is such a good person. How could he possibly kidnap you and make you into pills? Chuaning thought it better not to respond. The sky was brightening by the time Moran had settled all the refugees. After the shocking occurrences of the night before, he wasn't sleepy at all. He ventured down to the shore of Flying Flower Isle by himself. The tide had receded in the morning, revealing shoals that couldn't be seen in the darkness. Now that he was alone, his worries came rushing to the surface, clouding his thoughts in the haze he couldn't dispel. He slipped off his shoes and walked slowly along the shoreline, leaving 2 crooked trails in the wet sand. He found many things about Xu Shuanglin inexplicable. For instance, why did he refuse to wear shoes in the dead of winter, walking everywhere barefoot instead? Moran had hidden much of his past, and people had rarely treated him with kindness. Perhaps that was why he felt he understood why Xu Shuangling had put every effort into destroying Wu Feng sect and Jiangdong Hall, throwing the entire upper cultivation realm into chaos. The most painful thing in the world wasn't being beaten down or pushed aside. On the contrary, the most painful thing was to be betrayed by those closest to you. It was to be someone who had been innocent of wrongdoing, someone with a heart bursting with passion, who strove to become a Zhongshe of his generation, who then had everyone at the foremost competition in the cultivation world pointing at him, saying he'd stolen his techniques from his older brother, the techniques he'd poured his heart and soul into. He had been buried under this ridicule and contempt, never to rise again. After the present calamity passed, the cultivation world would inevitably have to deal with how the cards had been reshuffled. The sects that had suffered grievous injuries, whether to their reputation or their members, would all think Xu Shuangling is truly a madman. Perhaps only Mo Waiyu, who had once himself been a beastly, bloodthirsty murderer, would stroll alone along a peaceful, unbroken stretch of shore and consider just what kind of person was Xu Shuangling. Had that madman ever exhausted himself training in the Tangerine Grove when he was young and full of vigor? Had he returned after nightfall, weary and satisfied, with a sweet tangerine tucked into his sleeve for his lazy brother, never knowing that this useless brother's silver tongue would later make him a pariah in the world of cultivation? Had that madman ever been engrossed in reading cultivation scrolls, earnestly loading his brush with ink to pen some naive opinion? Had he bitten the brush's handle in dissatisfaction, sinking into deep thought, never knowing that no matter how hard he worked, what awaited him was a ruined reputation, his hopes forever extinguished? Moran closed his eyes. The sea breeze washed over his face, the dawnlight gilding his lashes. He remembered Xu Shuangling's courtyard, farewell to 3 lifetimes. 1 sip of Mengpo's soup bids farewell to 3 lifetimes of memories. Could Xu Shuangling have given his home such a name on a mere whim? There was also the question of what had happened in Moran's previous lifetime. Back then, Xu Shuangling had similarly sequestered himself within Wu Feng sect, and his goals ought to have been no different than they were in this one. But in that life, he had died amidst the beacon fires to save Ye Wangxi. Ye Wangxi. Xu Shuangling had given her this name, Wangxi, to forget the past. But what was he trying to forget? Had he once tried to forget those unjust, unfair times, to forget the hatred and glory of the past, to forget each and every repulsive face in his memory? And the corpse that Xu Shuangling had gone to such great lengths to drag out of the infinite hells, Luo Fenghua's corpse. What did he need this corpse for? In the illusion, Xu Shuangling had told Nanggong Liu that the curse on the ring could be broken by obtaining the caster's spiritual core. But it seemed, considering the outcome, that Xu Shuangling hadn't intended to help Nangong Liu get rid of the curse at all. The Heavenly Rift, the Qianlong Chess Formation, rebirth, and there was the hand that reached out of the rift at the end of those events. Moran vaguely felt that something wasn't right. His brows knitted tighter as he mulled it over. All of a sudden, his eyes flew open. He remembered. Years ago, by Jincheng Lake, the ancient dragon Wang Yue had said before his death, that mysterious person used the heart plug willow's power in Jincheng Lake to practice two secret techniques. The first was rebirth, and the second was the Qianlong Chess Formation. There had been no mention of the space-time gate of life and death. If Wang Yue was to be believed, Xu Shuanglin only cared about learning the techniques of rebirth and the Qianlong Chess Formation. The benefits of the latter were obvious. Controlling chess pieces would make executing his schemes much easier. But what about rebirth? Whom did he want to bring back to life? After some thought, Moran felt that there were two options, Rongyan and Luo Fenghua. Xu Shuangling had implied that Rongyan actually favored him in love, but had turned her back on Xu Shuanglin for reasons unknown, and ultimately married his brother. But upon further consideration, Moran concluded that she couldn't be the one. If Xu Shuanglin were really in love with Rongyan, such that he'd do anything to revive her, why would he have murdered her only son in the previous lifetime? Besides, he had spent years by Nangong Liu's side, disguised as Shuanglen Elder. If he'd wanted to use the rebirth technique for the sake of Rongyan, why did he not simply prevent her from being sacrificed at Jincheng Lake in the first place? So it wasn't Rongyan. Moran turned to gaze at the ocean dyed red by the rising sun, its crashing waves surging without pause. Following the sun's eastern ascent, the tide swelled, eating up the sand as Moran watched. Framed between heaven and earth was a vision of golden splendor. It had to be Luo Fenghua. Moran was certain of it. The person Nangong Shu wanted to revive was Luo Fenghua. Rufeng sect's affairs were the opposite of simple, no matter how they appeared on the surface. They were much like the rise and fall of the sea. The broken cowries and starfish with their brilliant dangerous colors all disappeared beneath the churning waves of dawn. As the tide rolled in, the waves swept away the pebbles and spread over the shoal he was walking on. Feeling a sudden chill beneath his soles, Moran looked down and saw that the surf had risen to beat against the top of his feet. As he wiggled his shapely toes, he felt a little cold and turned to head back up the beach for his shoes. But as soon as he looked back, he saw that Chuaning had walked over to join him. Set against a sky full of rosy clouds, he bore a mild expression and carried in one hand the shoes and socks Moran had tossed upon the sand. He handed Moran his shoes. "It's too cold to be walking around barefoot." Moran followed him to the top of a dune and lowered himself down next to some craggy boulders on the shore. He brushed the sand from his feet and put his shoes back on. Suddenly, he felt rather comforted. Even if he never received the kind love he wanted from Chuaning in this lifetime, Chuaning was still the best Shizun in the world. He cared for Moran and looked after him. When Chuaning saw him walking barefoot, he worried Moran would catch cold. "What do you make of the affair at Rufeng sect?" Chuaning asked. "It's more complicated than it looks." "I agree." Chuaning's brow had hardly smoothed once since the events of last night. Despite the calm of the moment, his forehead still creased with worry. Seeing that Moran had put on his socks and shoes, he turned again toward the vast ocean. The sun burnished the water's surface a brilliant red gold. It was hard to tell where the sunrise ended and the distant conflagration in Linyi began. "It'll be difficult to track Xu Shuangling through the space rift," said Chuaning. "If he hides and covers his trail well, a decade could pass before we catch sight of him again." Moran shook his head. "He won't wait a decade. After he recovers his strength, he'll definitely make his move." "What makes you think so?" Moran explained his theory, then added, "The corpse of Luo Fenghua we saw isn't real flesh and blood. It's merely an artificial body reconstructed in the infinite hells. After it exits the ghost realm, it'll rot quickly without a supply of yin energy. I'm guessing he'll show himself again within a year, even if he's not completely prepared." Chuaning didn't reply. He had always been exceedingly cautious in both thought and action. Unlike Moran, it wasn't his way to make bold conjectures regarding something so amorphous. But as he listened, he felt perhaps there was no harm in doing some guesswork. "What about that hand?" Chuaning asked. "What do you think about the hand that pulled Nangong Shu away?" Moran shook his head again. "I'm not well read on the first forbidden technique, so it's hard to say. I don't know." These words were untrue. Even if Moran no longer wanted to lie to Chuaning, there remained some things he simply couldn't say, that he didn't dare to say. For as long as he could remember, the days of peace he had been afforded were so pitifully few, likely totaling less than a year over the course of 2 lifetimes. If someone who had spent decades adrift was suddenly set before a bonfire with a pot of hot tea, how could he bear to step away? How could he bear to shatter the sweet dream with his own hands? So he could only say, "I don't know." But his heart stirred restlessly. Even if they knew whose hand it was, that wouldn't solve the mystery. Why hadn't the past lives Xu Shuanglin also gathered 5 elemental spiritual essences and slaughtered all who opposed him? One could assume, from how things played out, that Xu Shuanglin couldn't have figured out how to resurrect Luo Fenghua at all unless someone who was himself reborn had enticed him, led him astray. Years ago, at Jincheng Lake, Xu Shuanglin's white chess piece had said to Chuaning, "If you think that I'm the only one in this world who knows the 3 forbidden techniques, then I'm afraid you won't have much longer to live." Moran reasoned that Xu Shuanglin must know someone who had come to this world from another. At the same time, he was fairly certain Xu Shuangling didn't know that Moran himself had been reborn. Otherwise, why hadn't he revealed Moran's origins when they'd clashed at Rufeng Sect? He would have needed only capture some of Moran's memories in the scroll and expose them in the Inferno. No amount of Chuaning's goodwill could endure that. He'd probably disown Moran as his disciple on the spot. And then it would be all over for Mo Yu. He would never rise from such a fall again. Why hadn't Xu Shuangling done this? There were 2 possibilities. 1, because he wasn't able to, for one reason or another. 2, because he didn't know Moran's secrets. In any case, there was no action Moran could take. He didn't have enough information. If his opponent covered their tracks carefully, Moran could only stand and wait for that gleaming cold knife to come at his back at any moment. Moran pursed his lips and lowered his thick lashes with a slight flutter. There was only so much he could do. In the past life, consumed by selfish vengeance, he had committed too many outrageous deeds. In this life, he wanted to try his best to live each day well, no matter the outcome, to repay the people to whom he had owed debts, and protect his Shizun, Shimei, Shuomeng, and all of Xisheng Peak. He wanted to try his best to hold on to this brief warmth he'd never before experienced. As Moran was lost in thought, a fisherman rushed over. "Esteemed cultivators, bad news!" he cried. Startled, Moran sprang off one hand and leapt to his feet. What happened? The head of our island's merchant family just returned this morning from being out at sea for several days. When the village elder explained the situation, she was awfully unhappy with how he'd handled it. She threw a fit and said she wouldn't let the children and elderly stay in the vacant rooms. She's already kicked them out. Everyone you brought is standing outside. The fisherman was a gentle soul. As he spoke, his eyes grew teary. Those poor people. It's such a cold day, and she's not even willing to spare a coat or a blanket. The merchant also said. Chibaning also stood, his expression dark. What else did she say? She also said that since those people from Linyi ate Flying Flower Isle's rations and drank Flying Flower Isle's water, she's going to charge them for every last copper. And if they can't afford it, then she'll round them up and keep them on Flying Flower Isle as slaves. Before he'd finished, Chibaning was storming off toward the center of the island in a whirl of pale blue robes.